Gel printing is a fun technique where you apply paint or some type of ink or color to a gel plate, you make marks in that ink or paint, and then you remove everything with a piece of paper. You get unique results depending on the different substances you use to remove that paint, whether it's a soft end of a pencil or a silicone tool, or like I'll show you in today's video, 6 things that you probably have around the house, or at least some of them. And it's a very fun process. All links are included in the description, and I can't wait to show you how I do this. So the first method to achieve what looks like texture on your gel plate is to use embossed paper. Now you can find this, you buy it by the sheet at the scrapbook store. It's got a little bit of dimension. Not a lot, but enough to show up. So you find a pattern you like. If you are a paper crafter, you probably have these embossing folders where you put a piece of plain paper in between the embossing folder, close it, and run it through your die cut machine, and you'll have embossed paper. It's not terribly deep. The thickness isn't remarkable, but it's enough to create the impression. So the way I create that impression is just choose a color of paint or multiple colors, and then you want to put it on your gel plate. Or you can put it off your gel plate, roll your brayer in it, and then roll it onto your gel plate. But you want to have enough paint to make an impression, but not enough so that it's goopy. You don't want it oozing out from under your paper. Really, it's just trial and error. So just take your time and figure out how you want to do that. Place your paper with the embossed side down so that the texture is up against the wet paint. And then you roll your paper with your hands. You can use a brayer, you can use a baren. You just want to get a nice impression. And then when you pull off your paper, again, I always tend to double check and triple check. The paper removes a lot of the paint. And what you're left with right here is just the impression of the pattern. It's quite interesting. Now you can pick up that impression right away by putting paper on top of it, or you can take a few minutes and let the acrylic paint dry. It doesn't take too long. This is the time to go get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just see what happens while it dries. So I test it by just dabbing my finger gently up against the paint. If it's still tacky, I let it dry for longer. The worst case is you don't let it dry enough, and when you put your next layer of paint, this layer smears. So really try and be mindful of that. If you don't object to the smearing, don't worry about it. I tend to be impatient while I'm doing my gel prints, so I get a lot of smearing, and I've learned to not let it bother me. So now I'm going to take a contrasting color and just roll it along the piece. When I've covered up all that area, I'll come in with a piece of paper, set it on my plate, and do the same procedure again, where I press down. I want to make sure I get nice adhesion between the paper and that acrylic paint. Now, because I have a previous layer down, I need to let this set for a few moments so that the paint can dry on the paper somewhat, and all those layers of acrylic paint can absorb and adhere to each other. It doesn't take very long, 3 to 5 minutes, really. And now for the reveal. It's always hit or miss of what you're going to get. So it looked like I waited enough time, and I have a beautiful print. Now for the next technique, I'm going to use my oldest gel plate. It's stained. It does have a little paint remnants from the last time I used it. It doesn't bother me. The marks you see here underneath are actually part of the background, the plexiglass that I place it on. So to create this technique, I'm going to use packaging material. This came in a box. It was unexpected, and it has like these little, what I call ice cube squares. And I cut some down to smaller size to use as well. I'm going to start by laying my color. I'm using quinacridone crimson. And now I just want to brush it across the plate. You could also use multiple colors. You don't have to use just a single color. Once I have a layer that I'm happy with, I'm going to take my material, and I think I'll go this way. Just going to press it into the plate. The key is to make sure the packing material doesn't have any sharp edges that can damage the plate. So I have something interesting there. And I'll press it again. So that's unexpected and a fun thing to use. Now I'll just take some paper and pull this print just as it is. Burnishing it well. And then when I remove it, got a little pigment left on the plate, but I have a very interesting print. Now to take this a step further, I'm going to do the same technique again, where I ink up my plate with my paint, stamp it, and then I'm going to let that layer dry. So for my second layer, I'm going to take this Maple Yellow's hue and roll that across the piece. This will cover all the areas where the paint was removed. Now I'll put a piece of paper on top. This is just copy paper. I'll burnish this really well and then just give it a couple of minutes to dry. Again, because we're using multiple layers, we need all that paint to interact and meld together. And now when we remove the paper, I get a very interesting result. And this is all from using this packing material. This is a fun way that I can go back in when the paint is dry, and I can outline these squares or even draw in between them or on them. It's just a fun, unexpected print from some packaging material. The next technique is going to be using just lace. Now this is lace I've printed with in the past. It's a little stiffer because of the paint that's left on it. But you can use lace ribbon, strips of it if you want. It's the same procedure. I ink up my plate. I'm going to place the lace on it just as I want, gently, to make sure there's no wrinkles or folds. Then I'll get a scrap piece of paper, and I just want to burnish really well across the lace. This gets a nice impression on the plate. I get a little bit of paint on my paper, and then when I peel this off, you can barely see a lace impression. So once again, you have options. I'm going to let this dry and put a contrasting background color so we can actually see the print. Here it is with a little bit of light coming from underneath. And it really captures the delicate nature of that lace. So once it's dry, I'm going to take some white paint, a nice contrast. I give a nice even coat, not too much paint. And then the same procedure. Paper on top, burnish, let it sit for a moment or two. And then when it's time to remove the paper, you can pull it up and you get a very interesting result. I happen to love these colors. I just think they're gorgeous. So that's using lace to get an impression, to make your paper look like it's textured. The next way to get texture on your plate, the next object to use, is this netting. It's sold in rolls. It's primarily used for making wreaths. I don't tend to make wreaths, but I just love the texture. So I'll just cut a piece off, enough that it covers my plate. I can use either side. One side has the metallic edge in this particular netting. Roll my color onto my plate. Now I'll place my netting on top. Get a piece of scrap paper to gently press it in to the paper. Remove both. You can see there is a little texture. It almost looks like snake skin. Now for this one, instead of waiting for it to dry, which would make a beautiful result, I'm just going to pull a print right now. Put the paper down, burnish it, give it a moment to penetrate the paper, and then we'll see the result. And when I pull up the result, it cleans most of the plate off, and I get a very subtle texture. With a different background, I think it would show up, and it's a great starting point for adding more texture and more layers to this print, or I can use it to cut out shapes. It's not a solid black, it has an interesting texture here and there throughout the piece. Now for my next print, I'm going to use a wallpaper sample. You can see the back. Now the wallpaper sample, the result is very much like the embossed paper, but there is more of an embossing depth. So you get a very interesting result. And then the way it colors the paper, the actual wallpaper itself, is beautiful. So let me show you how I do it. I'm going to use a couple of colors this time. And I'm going to take my wallpaper, line it up with my gel plate, and burnish it well. Then I'll peel it off, and it colored the wallpaper beautifully. And it did some interesting things with the gel plate. I'm going to give this a moment just to dry, and then I'm going to put another color on top. So I'm going to take this beautiful color, brilliant yellow green, and roll it all along the plate. And then I'll pick up this print. So now I'm going to peel the paper off. And I get a beautiful result. Picking up the print from the wallpaper, because I use different colors, it has a different variation in the background. This is great paper to make collage with. Now the last way to make texture is to use something as simple as just some paper. This is brown paper. It was in a packaging box, but it's perfect. It's already wrinkled. And now I just want to wrinkle it some more. You can use multiple sheets of this as well. The grungier, the better. So I have a lot of texture going on just with this paper. And now I'm going to lay a layer of color. I'm going to take that crumpled paper. I just want to make sure it fits. Crumple it some more and lay it down. The harder you press and the more adhesion you get, the more paint you're going to lift off the paper. And you get this beautiful texture. I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to do this again. So now for the next layer, I'm going to use two different colors here, a light blue and this quinacridone crimson. Now I didn't cover the entire plate, but I have another piece of crumbled paper. And I'm just going to press down on that, trying to remove some of this color. I can get even more texture. And now I'm going to let this one dry. And you can continue doing this with layers all day long if you wanted. It just gives such an interesting result. So now to really preserve all this interesting texture, kind of grungy based on the colors I chose, I need to really let this dry. This is not in my wheelhouse. I'm very impatient when it comes to printing, but I have to really work on that. I'm going to take this beautiful Naples yellow hue. It's just a gorgeous color, golden and warm. And I'll put it on my plate, maybe a little more here. I want to make sure I pick up all that beautiful texture. And take a piece of paper, burnish it well, use my Baron, and really work that in. And now I'm going to let this dry. Because I'm so impatient, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea, and then when I come back, it'll be ready to remove. And now to remove the paper. And I have this beautifully textured print. Oh, I love this. I love the colors. This is a great background for adding maybe gold or white on top of. And it's also beautiful collage paper. This print takes a little time because of the layers, but oh, the results are worth it. I like to go through my materials and see how they look with the paint. Maybe some will spark some ideas. So we have the packaging material. This is one of the crumbled papers. This could be collage paper in itself, or it can be waiting to use more colors on it. The beautiful wallpaper. The crumbled paper from the first layer. I love the black and the texture here. This is the lace. I think this is great for printing on. I'm not sure if I'd use it for other tasks, but maybe. And the embossed paper. One of the paper I wanted to show you is when I roll my brayer, I just rolled it on this cardboard backing, and so I pick up the texture of that as well as the colors. Sometimes it's a mess, other times it's something interesting. So now let's review the papers we printed. So starting with the most recent paper, we have this gorgeous texture from the crumbled paper. We have the wallpaper print, beautiful texture and colors. The packing material with 2 colors and with 1 color. The embossed paper, beautiful. The netting, a very subtle effect. The lace, gorgeous. And here's another one with the lace. So those are 6 objects that I use in gel printing. They're not intended for art necessarily, but they certainly make very interesting results. Depending on the colors of paint you use or ink, you'll get really stand-out results. And if your print isn't perfect, you can use part of it for collage. I really enjoy gel printing. I find it very relaxing and enjoyable, and I hope you did too. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.